There are any calls to deport Ivy League graduates after?
American citizens were also getting deported.
Yeah, it's Italian American.
Fiji. Sounds like one of those video games.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
You know,
Mario.
Mario and Luigi.
He looks like the illegitimate son of Andrew Cuomo.
Oh, really? Oh, now you're like, now you're like ethnic stereotyping.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, he looks so much.
All right,
like
all right.
it. It's not-
Let's start.
Okay, so
Yeah.
recording is on people.
We are unraveling here, ladies and
Be on
gentlemen.
YouTube later.
We are unraveling.
So everything is ready to go.
All
Okay.
right, thank you, Brennan. Welcome to the December 9th, 2024 meeting of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Nat Delaney and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Bird. The meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will now field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. I don't know who hasn't taken minutes recently, but would appreciate it.
I can give it a shot. I just
Yeah.
don't know how to.
No, it's very easy, honestly. It's like we send you a template and you have the recording and you just fill in like the highlights. It's not like
Okay,
you're not like
When is next
yeah, you're not
level?
transcribing it.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, perfect. And if you have questions, just email me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
happy to help.
And because we have the recording, it could be very short.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah, you don't need to, like, I think a lot of people think it's a lot of details, but it's not.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I would have done it if I bought something to write with it, but.
I'll take a shot at it.
I appreciate that.
And
Yeah,
you'll get an email from the board office.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
and Brendan is very helpful.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll appreciate the help. 'Cause I have a
I
very
can
crazy
help you,
week
so-
ahead of me, but I'll be happy to do it.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brennan will conduct the roll.
Committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Tanya Arias,
Present.
Jim Collins.
Here.
Bee Disman won't be with us tonight. Robert Parfin,
Here.
Ned Kalani,
Here.
Ava Marie Lassiter,
Present.
David Lowenstein,
Present.
Reshma Patel,
Present.
Steve Perez.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Brennan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time to the board by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. One change I want to make, I know we have like the business areas and licensing folks on, some of them. I want to swap 2 and 3 just so we get to the cannabis one discussion first.
Okay.
And then we can do the other, the original one after that. Yeah, if there's no objections to that with the revised change of swapping 2 and 3, then we can drop the agenda. Cool. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the November 12th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt minutes as drafted.
There is an objection.
Yes, of
Very tiny one.
course.
My first name is spelled with an I, not a Y.
We can fix that.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Any better?
It's not your fault, it's my mother's fault.
All right, with that amendment, we will adopt the minutes with that change. And they'll be available on the CB6 website shortly after. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties that you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. So with that, we'll go into our agenda. The first one is the topic of transparency and integrity in government. And I think Eric Friedman from the CFPB is on. Eric, are you on and able to hear us?
He is on.
He said he might be a few minutes.
Yeah, I think I saw
Yeah, he-
video for half a second, but
Yeah, he is here, but, there might be some technical issues.
yeah, so while he's figuring out his recap, sort of, we can go into the resolution after we talk to Eric, but like, so the resolution that was distributed really covers the three intros that are in front of the council. So that's 952. The principal part of that is basically saying to verify any contributions that are greater than $50. Oh, hey, Eric.
Hi, I apologize. I was having a little technical difficulties,
No
but
worries.
I'm set up now.
Thank you for coming.
Of course, of course. Happy to kind of follow your lead and kind of however you'd like to. If you've got questions you'd like me to address, if you'd like to kind of get into the substance of the resolution, I'll kind of follow your lead here.
We can start with questions that folks have, and then we can go into the resolution. I know Steve has some prepared, so I think we can just go around if folks have questions. I don't know if Steve, you want to start with yours to kick it off?
Sure.
I don't know.
Did you wanna, we could finish your?
Yeah,
background
I can
statement,
finish
or-
recapping it. I feel like if folks have maybe seen the reso, so yeah, 952, so it's covering that three intros, 952, 953, and 954. So 952 is really verifying any contributions that are greater than $50. And the idea there is if you, for like those who are running, if they want to get public matching for those, it's really just ensuring those are better verified. 953 is really doing two things. One of them is trying to restrict contributions or bundling for folks who have business in front of the city, just given the conflict of interest there. And the second part is really just tracking all those bundling as well. I know the testimony that we shared is pretty helpful for understanding like the driver behind this. But historically, what's happened is, you know, in the past, a lot of these bundling were done by checks or cash, and it was a lot easier to track. With the growth of, you know, online donations, a lot of this has shifted to hyperlinks or just different ways to do it online. So it really builds ways to track those online bundling better, to understand who's doing the bundling, understand really the source of those, and then also related to that part of it, restrict anybody who has business in front of the city from doing this. And then 954 principally is mailing acknowledgements for folks who do get public matching. And this has sort of two parts. One is so that they're able to be aware of the fact that the city does this public matching, just it's good service and it makes them more aware of it. And the second part of it is just bring awareness to the fact that they are donating in case it's something like a straw donor where they're being used under somebody else's like donation to basically, you know, muddle, I guess, the situation, and basically just making them aware that, you know, their name was used for public matching, just in case that catches any incidences of people doing, I guess, nefarious things. So those are sort of my highlights on the three. I think we can go into questions, and then we can sort of go from there into the resolution.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question I had, and it's great that, thank you for joining, Eric from CFB. As I had mentioned on our last discussion, I've been through this process, and donations over $50 are verified already. So I don't understand how this is different than what already exists. And similarly, when people donate, they do get a letter
Yeah.
and they do have matching funds. And I had situations where people say they work for a bank. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to donate. You're a city employee. Those things
Yeah.
got corrected.
Yeah.
So I don't actually quite understand what these bills are doing that doesn't already exist. I think
Yeah.
what is needed is more funding for CFB
Right.
Yeah.
and more
Oh.
people
Right.
to do that work. As again, as I mentioned last time, these audits are taking a very long time.
Yeah, I'll let Eric take it. He definitely knows the situation better than I
Yeah.
do, but thank you. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, no, and I look, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you guys tonight, and I absolutely appreciate the interest in our work, and for sure the support. I will start by pointing out that none of this. I mean, I want to be clear because I think it's kind of in the reso, and appreciate the support for the agency and for the Master Grants program. None of this is an issue of funding for us. The Campaign Finance Board, one of the really smart things that the folks who set up the CFB did in the charter was to protect our funding. And so we have, we're an independent agency. We report to a board that is appointed in part by the mayor and the city council. Um, and we have had this culture of independence over the years, since we've been around since the late 80s, has allowed us to kind of do these audits and kind of, enforce the law without fear or favor of folks in the political system. So, we make our budget request. It goes into the mayor's executive budget without modification. And, the city council over the years has generally exercised deference when it comes to our budget, and really only once or twice in our history, during the kind of COVID emergency, has the council ever come in and altered our budget after it was submitted to the mayor. So a lot of the challenges that we have in completing the audits really don't have to do with the funding and our resources, but kind of, one real driver of the length of those audits is, particularly over, we've been a little generous when it comes to kind of granting candidates extensions to respond to our requests. Particularly in dealing with, this last election in 2021, which was, we ran in the middle of COVID. And so we've partly as a result of kind of the difficulties of administering, keeping our work going through that, through the pandemic emergency, and some of the challenges the candidates had faced, we've been pretty generous and lenient when it comes to candidates who need more time to respond to a lot of our requests. And one kind of outgrowth of that policy is that we are kind of approaching this next election with a large number of audits from the 2021 election still yet to be completed. And so I didn't mean to take us off topic, but did want to address this question about the budget. We have a new executive director who took over the role earlier this year, and under his leadership have been really putting together a strategic plan that takes us through the end of this decade. That which we're really putting a high priority on putting in place the processes and policies that will enable us to get 90% of audits done within a year of the election, which is kind of a really ambitious goal for us considering our history, but one that we feel is really important. Because we've heard from a lot of folks and in elected office and otherwise who feel really strongly that that information about the last campaign should be available to voters by the time we're getting ready to run the next campaign. I'll say just whatever we're trying to do in terms of the audits, whatever new mandates come as a result of this legislation or any other, the resources that we need are going to be there for us. And so I do want to be clear about that. Now you had a question about Intro 952, which I think of these three bills is the one that we actually just really take exception to. And I'll explain why. You asked what is different.
Yes.
And what it would do is it would take two categories of contributions, right? So contributions that came in through an intermediary, contributions that were made by cash or money order. It really like larger than 50. And so for cash and money orders, those are capped at $100 in any case, right? So candidates cannot accept contributions larger than $100 in cash or money order. I think in part in deference to the idea that those contributions are kind of harder to track, right? Cash is harder to audit, money orders are harder to audit. So state law caps those at under $100, actually at $99. So I'll be clear, like both methods of making contributions, whether it's through an intermediary or by cash or money order, are perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. Like these are ways that campaigns, that raise money, all without problems. But the bill would subject these contributions to greater levels of scrutiny, a higher standard of documentation than for other contributions. So, we've seen a lot this year. We've gotten a lot of questions about preventing straw donor activity. It's happening, a lot of news stories looking at, I think anytime a mayor is involved, then it's high visibility, high profile. But some of these solutions that we've seen and heard and have been proposed, kind of get to the point where we're creating barriers to participation in the process. So rather than giving us the space to do our work and investigate these instances where we feel there is a higher level of risk, it requires these kind of additional investigative steps across the board, starting from the assumption that these legal methods of contribution are the presumption that there's something shady going on. I mean, does anybody you remember? Anybody remember the name Richard Reed? He was the
Reed?
guy, Richard Reed, right? He was the guy that tried to board an airplane to Miami with a bomb in his shoe, right?
Oh.
And it didn't. This was a couple months after 9/11. It didn't work. But 20 plus years later, we are all getting on airplanes and taking off our shoes before we got on airplanes because of the one guy who once tried and failed to light his shoes. Right. So like 2.5 million people every day board a plane in the United States. And and a lot of them, if you're above, above 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever it is, you're taking off your shoes to get on a plane because of this one instance. Now, like, does it truly protect people? Does it make them feel safe? But look, people have to fly to get places, and people will put up with a lot to get on an airplane. But New Yorkers don't have to run for office. They don't have to. The matching funds program, if it is working, it should be about removing barriers to participation, welcoming more candidates and more voices into the process and allowing them to be heard. And I think one of the challenges that we see if we make that matching funds program too onerous for candidates, too onerous for contributors, it won't do what it's intended to do, and folks won't participate. And that's what we see with this bill. Just one other point I'll make about 952 because I know there are other pieces to talk about. So, one of the things that we're tasked to do as an agency, in addition to administering the matching funds program for city elections, is that we're doing voter engagement all around the city, and we have a mandate to increase participation, broadly, but also specifically in areas of the city or in communities that are underrepresented among voters as a whole, right? So one of the analysis we did of the 2021 election, looking at where cash and money order contributions come from, is that between $50 and $99 showed they're most likely to come from areas of the Bronx and areas of Central Queens, places with lower voter turnout compared to the rest of the city, right? These are the people we're trying to engage. We want to bring them into the political process by incentivizing those small dollar contributions that we're talking about, instead of erecting those additional barriers. And so, I think this is we've reflected this feedback to the council, and I think you've seen, I think clearly the testimony that we delivered at the council hearing back in June that considered these bills in committee. I think we've certainly been talking with council and staff about ways to kind of narrow the focus so that it might kind of work for all involved. But I think we really start from a place where this is proposing a solution that is too big and broad really to be effective, and we were concerned would really put up additional obstacles in a place where we're trying to welcome more people into the political process.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if that was like too big of an.
No, thank you, Eric. You made a really good point that the whole idea of this was to increase participation, and it's a very good point. And what is your role at CFB, Eric?
I apologize. I should have introduced myself properly at the start. So I am Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs at CFB. So
Okay.
I've been, 18 going on 19 years I've been with CFB, and have kind of really gotten a chance to see the system evolve quite a bit over that time.
And Eric, I guess like on the audits, like you mentioned, like, some of the ones from 21 are not yet done. Like what makes them take that long? And is there anything that like we can or should at least think about doing to make that faster? Because to your point, like that, from your like the testimony too, right? Like that is the
Yeah.
big gating item.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess we can just leave it there. Like, just curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It's a really important question, and it's one that I think that I'm really, I'm happy that, with our new leadership, we're kind of taking it head on, and I think, one concrete thing we've done already. I talked a bit about those extensions that we grant to campaigns, partly as in deference to, yeah, I mean, I was talking about it in the context of kind of managing the system during the COVID emergency. But I think, ultimately we've been, I think under previous leadership have looked at it as a way just to kind of make things a little bit more, user friendly and maybe compassionate for candidates who are working to get, to respond to this stuff. But I think one of the things that we are to turn the corner and to start to hit that kind of North Star goal that I talked about earlier. If we're going to get to a place where we're actually finishing practically all of the audits within a year after the election, it means, making some tougher choices. We had one of our board members who's been through the process as a candidate herself. Dawn Smalls is a more recent appointee to our board, but is kind of made the point to us as we've talked about it, like, if you're a couple of years after the election, like it doesn't actually help to give people more time, right? As we've talked about, it doesn't, right? If you're looking for a contract or an invoice or, a piece of documentation that like you should have collected in the moment during the campaign, um, and you're already 2 years out. If you don't have it, you're not going to be able to produce it if we give you another month. So we've got to do better at kind of capturing all of that earlier in the election cycle when the campaign staff is together, while they're still working, and make those requests for documentation earlier in the cycle, either right after the election is done or even before election day. So that's one thing we're looking at, and I think we've really started a kind of a series of internal conversations about where in the process we can find kind of efficiency gains like that, in a way that it really hasn't. And again, I've been with CFB a long time, but I think that we're starting to take these questions on it kind of more directly and in a more serious way than I've seen in my time there. I see a couple hands going up, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna stop. But,
Jim, then Tanya, then David,
Yeah.
just in order of hands raised.
Very briefly, it seems to me that, while you're trying to do voter outreach.
Yeah.
To communities in central Queens and the South Bronx and what have you.
Yeah.
A lot of those communities are unbanked. So this issue with the money orders and the cash contributions, explain to me again how you're doing that? Because it seems, from what I understand, you're trying to restrict the cash contributions, and that doesn't make sense to me, because any person willing to do, campaign finance fraud could simply distribute cash, make a credit card payment under someone else's name and proceed that way. So it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me that would fence off that particular violation. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I want to give $10,000 to Mayor Adams. So I make I make that contribution through a series of credit card payments through straw men and, finance it via cash.
Right.
Finance the repayment via cash. Now, is my understanding of what you said correct?
So
That trying to wall off cash payments and money order payments, because as I said, a lot of the people that you're speaking of are unbanked.
right. So I mean, to that point specifically, I think
Just very briefly.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, I think, your point about, folks in some of those communities being unbanked was one of the large reasons why I think our position is that, adding this layer of extra scrutiny, on top of all cash contributions and all money orders is not warranted. And it could potentially put up barriers to that community and kind of make folks feel as though, again, provided a discouragement,
Mhm.
a chilling effect for
Mhm.
what is a completely legal form of participation in the process. Now
It's just,
that cap I was talking about, what is in state law, right? And I think, again, part of the reason for that policy, as I understand it, is that the sort of scheme that you mentioned, right? Where, and it happens, but rarely. But if you have a donor with $10,000 who'd like to funnel it into a council campaign, right?
right.
And kind of defraud the matching fund system, by
It could.
right, like handing out cash and
Can,
and
can
having
we
people
do,
give it to the candidate
right,
under their own
wouldn't it,
names might,
wouldn't it, just follow up, wouldn't it be
yeah,
more appropriate just to send the donor a card, you hold the funds in suspense,
right.
send the donor a mail card to their address and ask them to sign off under penalty of perjury. We have this record of you making this campaign finance contribution. Can you please state that it is from your own funds and for the purpose that it was sent?
Right.
Couldn't you do that? Wouldn't that be much more efficient? Plus you have a little, and then hold the funds in suspense until that card is returned so that genuine donors will have the incentive to fulfill the obligation to return the card.
So can
Wouldn't
we
that
just
make a lot more sense of what you're talking about? To
so
try
let
to
me let me let
stem the
me
fraud you're speaking of?
so I want to make sure that I understand the idea right. So
You
someone,
get, I'll explain it again. You get
okay,
the money.
yes,
The money is held in suspense and cannot be applied to the account of
I
the campaign until you receive back a card from the named donor certifying under penalty of perjury that this amount is from my own funds and for the purpose that I stated, to the candidate that I stated.
So for
Wouldn't
someone
that
who
make
wants to
more
give a
sense?
contribution to a candidate, those funds would be held by CFB until until we receive the contribution card from the campaign.
Precisely.
I, you know, I, that's an idea I haven't heard. I'd have to think about it a bit. I think it strikes me as just as kind of a reaction, as something that would be tough for campaigns to manage, just in terms of I think wanting to have those funds available as they're collected, right?
It's the same way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
corporations proxy votes. I mean, you
Sure,
send the thing out and
sure. I think it's, it sounds like in the same spirit of that 952, and where you kind of, inserting that oversight into the relationship of between the campaign and the contributor, like indiscriminately, right? Instead of really using, the knowledge and experience and kind of like everything we know about looking for schemes like this, and kind of being strategic and targeted about where we exercise that additional scrutiny.
Sorry, I'm
You
gonna go
know,
to Tanya. Sorry, to keep things moving, Tanya.
Hi, Eric. My name is Tanya Arias.
Hi, Tanya.
How's it going? It's a little concerning to me that you're telling us that you have the resources, you have the funding, you have the people, you have everything you need to do
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
but it's taking 3 years, 2 years to get it back. So somewhere here, it's not jiving for me. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
problems and issues like fruit, the longer you leave unattended, the worse it's gonna get.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be better if we find some form of funding? Ava Marie will tell you about it later, but some form of funding that can accelerate the process by including additional resources for you, because it doesn't seem very efficient that we're waiting 3 or 4 years to
I,
get,
I totally agree.
okay.
But I totally agree that, listen, you know, I agree that we can, should, need to do better.
Yeah.
In terms of the timing of the audits. Like, there's no, like, I can't sit here and excuse the fact that we're still trying to finish a pile of those audits from 2021 when we are really starting, we're like going to be in the thick of 2025 in about, I don't know, about 20 minutes from now, right?
Yeah.
Like literally.
Have you
So
identified why it's happening, Eric? Have you
can I,
identified why it's taking this long?
well, I think, like I said, you know, there are a few things, right? And I think, you know, you sort of, the metaphor I used a minute ago, I thought was a good one, in that, you know, you leave something to sit around for a long time, sometimes it's hard to change your ways the longer you're in, you know, in a particular set of processes and systems. You know, I'll say, like, just another kind of another way we've kind of been in a rut, you know, is you know, a lot of the technology that we rely on to collect data from campaigns as they do their disclosure, and then for us to review it internally. You know, it's based on technology that was built back in the 90s, you know, and we've, over the years, I think, you know, tried and frankly failed to take on the project of really upgrading the technology and getting it to a point where it's modern and, you know, gives us the like the current day tools, you know, that are available to most for-profit businesses. Like, we just, I mean, you know, and I don't think this is a set of problems that's unique to CFB. I think, you know, a lot of government agencies have similar challenges around information technology, generally, but you know, it's had us stuck for a bit, to be completely honest. But I think, you know, part of why I tell you it's not about the resources, like, I'm going to pull in one more metaphor, right? If folks are familiar with kind of, I don't know, I was a fan of the Power Broker, and then whatever, a little bit of a student of Robert Moses, and the whole, you know, like the highway building, the story of, you know, but when it comes to planning, right, I think what you've learned over the years, if you've got too much traffic on a highway, you don't build your way out of traffic, right? If you add more lanes, what happens? More cars just come and fill the highway, and you've got traffic that might be worse where you started off. Like, just adding more auditors for us, frankly, isn't the answer here. You know, if it were, I would tell you. If it
With
were,
technology?
I'd be banging the drum and saying, you know, we need more staff, we need more resources. We'd be asking the mayor to add them. But what it comes down to is, like, we really need to do some tough work internally. We need to get the technology right. We need to make some really, you know, you know, just make some hard choices about updating processes that haven't really been changed in way too long. Um, you know, like part of falling behind and feeling as though we're always taking too long to do these audits is that we get kind of caught in the rut of never being able to pause the work so we can take a hard look at those processes. And so I'm just really excited with the new leadership we have that's kind of prompting that inquiry and getting us started on the right path. So um, again, limiting the number of extensions that we give to campaigns so that we're kind of working together to shorten that cycle, you know, changing processes so we are, you know, getting a lot of these documents in real time, you know, while asking questions while they're fresh, instead of just putting everything in a pile and coming back to campaigns, you know, 6 months after, a year after election day. You know, after everybody's treasurer has kind of moved on to, like, going back to their day job, after the staff have all left and kind of they're kind of on to their next jobs. That's not the time for us to be asking those questions. We need to be asking them closer to the election, when the candidate has support around them to be able to respond. So if I told if we had, if we had that, that full operational work plan ready to talk about how we're going to do it, I'd share it with you. But I'll tell you where we are. I've talked about a few of those pieces, but we've made that commitment at a high level, talked about it in front of the council last week, to be by the next set of elections in a place where we are getting 90% of the audits done within a year. That's our aim. I think I'm happy to say, and one of the reasons I'm happy to kind of, stayed with CFP as long as I have is really like we have the independence to kind of set a kind of long term goal like that and be able to deliver on it. Because the resources we need are always going to be there.
Ava Marie,
Um, Hi, Eric. Eva Marie Lassiter. Thank you for explaining the plans, but since you've mentioned the audit, with 90% hopefully completed within a year, and also the community outreach, and now the issue with technology,
Yes.
it appears that actually the resources of funding is an issue, as well as possibly increasing staffing. And at our last meeting, we had discussed possibly there might be an instrument that would help in increasing the funding. If when people contributed, could there possibly be a notice with their contributing that they know that 2% that contribution would go to CFB, and that would help to increase your resources, your funding resources, and possibly then you could increase staffing and also address this issue of technology. Would being able to collect that 2% per contribution be helpful as well? And also, would it, and from an administration standpoint, would it be workable in terms of increasing your budget and also helping to increase staffing to accomplish all of these plans that you have for the coming year?
So can I just repeat back? So you're suggesting that contributions to candidates should
No,
include like,
yes, contributions to candidates, but 2% of that would go to CFB. 2%, $25, $50, or whatever.
oh gosh,
From it.
I would say this to that suggestion. I think, for folks who are encouraged to go out and make contributions to candidates because, they've connected with a candidate who speaks to the issues they care about, who they kind of believe in and things can help make a positive difference in their quality of life, wherever they live in the city. I would have a hard time making the case to that contributor that CFB should have some claim on a little bit off the top of that contribution to kind of handle our administrative stuff. I mean, look, we're a city agency. We're funded through the city's general fund. Again, that we have a guarantee in the charter that our budget requests is included in the executive budget that the mayor presents to the council without change. So, I mean, to a certain extent, there are a lot of agencies out across the country that do work like ours, whether it's in, campaign finance regulation or ethics regulation, what have you, that have similar funding mechanisms that they aren't in control over. It's other agencies that have to kind of, every year kind of go to the people who they oversee and ask them for the funds so that they could audit their campaigns or kind of like look at their personal financial disclosures or oversee their ethics. And those are tough asks. We're incredibly lucky, and I think it's to the benefit of all New Yorkers, really. I would argue that we have that level of protection for our budget that we do. It's enabled us, it's provided us with the independence to audit and conduct oversight, of members of the city council, of candidates for mayor, of incumbents, without fear that our budget will be slashed in retribution. It's incredibly important to the integrity of our work that that's the case, and so that's I would have a little bit. Again, this is my personal take because the idea that you described is not one that we've discussed internally. I haven't heard before tonight, but I think I would have a little trouble with the idea that contributors would kind of see some of that money go to the administrative agency as opposed to the candidate they believe in.
Just had a question though. Don't you think that the average voter would be receptive because it's going to CFB to increase the transparency? You keep saying audits, but I think emphasizing the transparency and the fact that the 2% would be so marginal in terms of their contribution. It's not as if that they're giving to a campaign, but CFB is trying to take a large amount of what they want to give to their candidate for CFB's own purposes. Do you think that a small percentage of that contribution going to CFB and the emphasis on transparency, that the voter who is contributing would be receptive to that?
You know, again, I'm happy to think more about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that for New Yorkers, for small contributions, those contributions to candidates are being matched with public funds as well. So, I think what you're suggesting has not the greatest impact on the money available to candidates. I don't know. I'll leave that there because I see another hand
Yeah.
up there.
Steve, then
Richard,
Rachel.
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Steve Perez, thank you for joining us again.
Sure.
This is helpful to our discussion. I wanted to turn to Intro 953, which I think we haven't really touched on yet, but that is related. And as I understand it, what it's trying to do is to prohibit people who have doing business with the city can no longer bundle on behalf of other donors. And so in the testimony, CFB suggested that really wasn't a good way of increasing transparency, that people would just, because of the definition of intermediaries, and there would be other ways for them to circumvent that. So that's not really the way to go about it, but suggested that closing some of the other loopholes regarding having a campaign event, fundraising events, where you have the hosts, the lists of the attendees, and if there's co-hosts, then every host needs to also be listed, and other things related to the boards, let's say, of organizations, the officers of the boards. That's another loophole because the CEO cannot give, but an officer of the board could give the money and not be counted as an intermediary. So are you suggesting that those would be more effective at kind of closing some of these transparency gaps, or are there other ideas?
So I'll say this, and 953 is, I think we kind of, one of the things that I think that we would point out, or did point out in that testimony, a previous piece of legislation that came through the council during my time here, it limited matching funds, right, for contributions that were bundled by people who are doing business with the city. And one of the things we saw kind of following on from that law when it was changed was a reduction in the volume of people who are being reported as intermediaries. So there's a possibility, I think one of the lessons we took from that, well, there's a possibility that, now that there's this financial incentive not to report intermediaries or bundlers, that people are responding to that and they're not reporting their intermediary activity. So that was one kind of just observation that we shared with council as part of their review of this bill. I will say I understand kind of where it comes from. And so one of the other things that we've been talking about with the council, and I know there's an A version of the bill that I think is coming soon. But we've been talking with folks there about strengthening that definition of intermediaries. I think one of the things, and I think you pointed this out a second ago, is that it's unsatisfying about the law that requires the disclosure bundling activity is that there are a couple loopholes in it. I don't like the word loophole, but there are a couple of exceptions in it, right? You mentioned kind of hosts of a fundraiser. Well, sometimes it doesn't capture all the hosts of a fundraiser, and there's an exception for a party that's a house party, and there's you know so there's exceptions for some family members, right? So there are all these kind of nips and tucks that have been taken out of that definition of intermediary over the years by the city council in order to make things quote unquote easier for campaigns. But what it's really done is it's obscured the transparency and kind of it's meant that some of that activity has gone unreported because it fits into one of these categories that maybe it doesn't need to be reported. So that's in our discussions over this with the council on this bill, I think kind of are hoping to address some of those challenges with the intermediary definition. And we're hoping that what comes out of the other side is a clearer, cleaner definition of what needs to be reported in law, so that it provides, I think, pretty clear guidance to candidates and campaigns about what information they need to collect, and provides information to the public they expect to see when you tell them, "Hey, we've got information about bundlers." I think the observation, that I have and discussed with my colleagues and folks outside the agency is like that. I think the reality falls short of the public expectation and what they're going to see there, and that's the challenge that I think that we want to fix, and are hoping to get there, in a version of this bill, potentially.
Sure.
I'll let Jim go because mine is
Oh,
more point of information,
okay.
so, yeah.
Just returning back to the audits for a moment.
Yep.
Are you three questions. First, is the bulk of the audit time spent on revenue coming in or expenses of the candidates? Second question, do you use statistical sampling or do you have people going in and ticking and tying numbers? And third, does the campaign finance board have some kind of systematic format for doing an audit the same way as most CPA firms have?
Okay, I'll try to go backwards. So yes, we have a systematic way of doing audits because it's really important that just like for purposes of non-partisanship,
Can I ask if it's transaction based?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask if it's transaction based? So for example, income, expense, operational, refunds, things like that.
Well,
Do you assess transactions or do you simply assess income and expenses?
we are in some cases, in some cases looking transaction by transaction for sure. I think you asked about sampling, and there are some instances where frankly we have to take a sample of transactions to just to get through it, within campaigns, right? To kind of determine, okay, is there risk here? If we get to a certain level of risk that we need to do a deeper, more detailed dive, and so that's but it is not kind of like a sort of broad overview audit. We are kind of looking transaction by. If you are so inclined, you can go to our website nyccfb.info, and our final audits are all posted on the website once that they're finalized. And so if you can look at those documents there and kind of get a more detailed sense of what each audit involves, and sort of the level of detail.
Right.
And so the first one was about when do we look at it sort of receipts versus expenditures. And
Right.
I'll say real briefly.
Lost time.
Well, it's really before and during the election, like up until election day, we are mostly looking at contributions. And part of the reason for that is like the matching funds that go out to candidates are based on contributions that come in.
Mhm.
Right. It's like we match small contributions from New York City residents. And so, everything we've talked about, like providing documentation to authenticate those contributions, so we're looking at at contribution by contribution to ensure that candidates are qualifying honestly and completely. Like if you're candidate for city council, for instance, you got to raise 75 contributions in your district, $5,000 in matching claims, right? Those small contributions. And then beyond that, we're kind of counting them up until you get to the maximum. So that's a lot of that's happening before the election, and it is time consuming. The long tail of the audits and I think what we get to kind of afterwards in most cases is the spending. And we're asking campaigns to keep records, detailed records of the spending during the election, but really we are looking at those afterwards.
Do you know a fellow by the name of Sam Antar? Do you know him?
Yeah, the
He's got
name.
he has a very active Twitter feed. He
Okay,
was the
maybe that's why I know the name.
he was the former CFO of Crazy Eddie. He ended up going to prison
Oh
for
yeah.
fraud.
But still on
But
Twitter.
he maintains he's been going through a lot of public officials campaign expenditures, mostly at the state level, I think, not at the city level, and doing what he calls a citizen audit and questioning some of the expenditures of the individuals,
Okay.
of the elected officials. But I'm wondering, does Campaign Finance Board have a standardized form for expenses akin to the the IRS standard, where you have to show the expense, the time, the place, the individuals, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
For entertainment and travel and basically T&E.
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
You're gonna reach my soon. You may have already reached my limit of detailed knowledge of the audit process, but so I won't try and describe the detailed form of it to you. But the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, so I just have lots of points of information, as I've been a candidate, have gone through this process. And a lot of this stuff you're asking is actually public, you can look it up on the CFB website, but each month you have to submit.
Yeah, I know that.
And there's a form and there's and they do a very thorough audit, like they do
Mhm.
go through and check. And I think I mentioned this last meeting, like I had friends who had moved and there was donations, they had to sign a letter saying that they actually made the donation themselves because it didn't match whatever CFB was looking up.
Yeah.
And there was, I don't know if people remember, Brian Benjamin, who was lieutenant governor, had to resign because there was a straw donor case, and that was like after 6 months after he ran.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we've had straw donors a few times.
it happens, yeah. So so it happens, and they've done a good job in catching. And to your point, I do think people will care about the 2% because it's really hard to get people to donate in local elections. And this is why we have, Adams going to the Turkish people to get donations because New Yorkers aren't donating. It's hard.
His next trip is Northern Syria.
I should probably not say anything about that. Sorry.
You should.
You should.
You didn't hear it.
You didn't hear, but I mean, so I think that all of us in this room are engaged, but I think the general public in New York does not know about matching funds. It doesn't know when somebody asks them to donate, why they should donate for the city council candidate, right? They donate because they're your friend.
Yeah.
Right, and you'll have it's something else is that people will perhaps be like someone's of the, they associate with, right, in their neighborhood, their ethnicity or something.
Yeah.
But otherwise they don't.
I see we have Q&As on the bottom.
They're about the president. Okay, where right now.
No,
questions?
I just want to say, just in response to that comment, I think you're 100% on point, 100%. I think that people make contributions because the candidate asked them. And I think it's that connection that people make around the issues that matter to them that ends up generating those contributions. And I think I mean, to your point that people don't really know about the matching funds program, I think you're right that there's this gap in knowledge in most of the voting public, and it's something that we're really working to address. We will be working to address over the course of this election. It's an observation that we've made and we share. So appreciate the comment.
I actually have one last thing. I submitted my audit in July of 22. I still have not heard back.
So everything I said earlier about us needing to do better, I'll recall here.
Okay.
Any last questions?
No.
other
All right,
questions?
Eric, thank you so much for the time. I know this is quite long, but really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about all the things that are going on here.
No, I appreciate the interest. Happy to come back and talk more anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Have a good night.
But you guys do the same.
So I guess I think you can sort of debrief that as a group, like open to folks' thoughts on just broadly that conversation, just like how it impacts thoughts on the resolution as well. I know kind of want to remain efficient, but also just, that was a lot of information.
My main
Super
thoughts
helpful, yeah.
is that it's just not working.
Well, so takeaways here, one huge takeaway is it's not the resources.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
This is
which
not
is
the
what we
res- This
thought,
is not the right limiting step.
yeah,
So what there are changes are underway. Basically, there's an internal process going on. He can't reveal that yet because they're still working through it, but changes are happening. And there's a lot of kind of holes in these intros, these legislations that they're not quite hitting the target in terms of really creating the impact that we
Yes.
want to see. So I would say, I would suggest that perhaps we put this in the parking lot and
Yeah.
say, there's probably some changes coming. There may be new legislation that's drafted. Let's track it and see what we need to do to support it. But at this stage, I don't think we can support as is kind of these intros and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would make
Yeah,
a motion
restaurants,
to
yeah.
table this.
Table.
Yeah, let's table it because
Yeah.
I find there's a huge gap. It's disjointed between the laws and trying to put laws to do this and the other with an organization that's not working.
totally agree. And
I
think,
mean, it's not working.
I mean, I
Yeah.
would say it's not.
No, but
working.
it's-
I mean.
But I think there's room for improvement. Yeah.
If it's taking you 3 years
Yeah,
and you're telling me it's not because of resources, it's not because of money, you don't need more people, you don't need more money, you just have to get your act together, then come on, something is not.
More laws are not,
Yeah.
helping.
No, I
Created
agree.
more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
yeah,
that.
yeah, I know, and I see your point. I'm saying some people's audits are done, some people's aren't, right? So to.
You're
Yeah,
still
mine
working.
is not, but yeah,
Ah.
I just assumed that I was not that relevant a person, right? Like, they did the for people, like Adams first.
I don't know,
You sound-
I'm a mathematician, but,
Yeah.
so my brain works in terms of
Yeah.
logic,
Yeah,
and it's just, it doesn't,
He sounded like they didn't have
Doesn't
any
connect for
statistic,
me.
he said,
Yeah, well, he's-
he said
he's-
statistical
Yeah.
sampling, but he's not talking.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
he's a public affairs person.
Yeah.
I know,
Right?
I know.
And so that's
and
why I asked him what his role was,
and
because he could.
With a bad case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to hear more on the
Yeah.
technology at some point and what they're actually doing
Right,
to
because
address.
that's-
the issue.
Anybody can sign up for training at the CFB,
I've been
if you want to,
I've been through it.
Yeah, we should table this.
Yeah, sorry, so I was gonna say, I was trying to motion table, I think to his
Yeah.
point, he mentioned there's gonna be like an A version of a resolution coming out, so we can track that, we can track their new like workflow
Yeah.
plan, things like
so
that.
we're
And I
tabling
think when
it.
those
Yeah.
come out, we can decide, but yeah, I would entertain a motion to table those.
Okay,
I second
So
it.
moved.
okay. So all in favor? I mean, do we do a
I don't
roll
think we
call?
need to.
No, okay,
Honestly, you don't even,
What about those Q&A?
you don't even need to do a roll call,
Okay.
you should just agree to.
okay.
Long red zone.
Okay, so we
It's like,
agree.
except they're related to that, so I would.
There is
don't worry.
no-
Do you know that?
You,
How do you-
the sync, the,
I read them, I can read them.
Oh,
here.
okay.
It's on the fridge.
yeah.
Awesome.
Bridge? Oh, okay, great.
So then we can go into the cannabis resolution,
Okay.
Reshma, if you wanna talk to that,
Sure.
and Brendan, if you could put it up.
Yep, I will. Give me a moment. I'm gonna share it on screen so that way.
Okay, so this is the resolution, while you bring it up, that we talked about last time, based on, the Office of Cancer Management, parameters that seem to be not working, that well in our community and wanting more transparency, and that in light of a recent issue that came up with, opening up a large cannabis shop on 822nd Avenue, where there is a local business that is perhaps going to be displaced if the cannabis dispensary opens. So this was adding to that. Well, I see if there's a typo right there in process, but we made some changes to the draft that was sent around on Friday based on comments from Anton, who is the head of the Business Affairs and Licenses Committee. And those changes are in red here, so I don't know if you wanna, I think it starts at line 34. Brendan, the first change. Okay, so yeah, at the bottom there. So it's line 38. I changed it to a better distance qualification would be 500 feet from the establishment's door to the primary public entrance of a school or house of worship. And I had made it to be a greater distance, but Anton pointed out to me that these regulations are based on the regulations that they use for the state liquor license. And so to have the language more in line with that, and so this is where that change comes from.
Wouldn't that be the better distance qualification portion? Wouldn't that be better stated in the resolved? That where we request a better distance or
Good
suggested.
point,
better-
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I changed it, yeah, so we can move that to a resolve, that's a different.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
Yeah.
what, should we move to a resolve again?
The part that's in red. Or pink, I guess, I don't know what color this is.
That looks like fuchsia.
Fuchsia, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right, it's fuchsia.
I only know primary colors.
And because the current regulation right now, says it has to be 500 feet, but in a straight line. And as we saw with 820 Second Avenue, there's a couple of schools around there, right around the corner. And because it's not in a straight line, even though it's less than 500 feet, it doesn't matter. So this language would ensure that you would have a 500 feet distance from the school.
Right.
So where are we inserting this?
Yeah, so then there's already two
I would
therefores.
Just make it another,
Yeah.
therefore be it further resolved that we request the. There we go. Therefore be it resolved that we suggest a maximum distance or minimum distance of 500 feet.
Yeah,
Just hold on a moment,
Yeah.
having some
I see.
Technical
tech
difficulties.
issues.
Do you have editing permission?
I thought I did.
yeah, because I've given it to everybody, right?
Yeah,
Is it not letting you? Does it say?
Yeah, maybe it's that I'm logged in from a different account.
Yeah, I made it public, though. I didn't tell people's name.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, but if not, I can log into a computer and
yeah.
we can do it from there.
While you do that, I can tell you that
Oh, you know what?
the,
I can do it by phone.
the pot
Yeah.
store that was on 44th and Second is closed. It's been dismantled.
Yeah, that was the illegal one.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's great.
I don't understand how they just pop up like mushrooms and then they go from,
Legal or illegal?
I guess it must have
No,
been
no,
illegal.
that was the illegal one.
They have this, what do they call these little gloves that you use to, you scan with your telephone and it ties into a link.
QR code.
QR codes. They have these QR codes and the one that they have for the state only goes to the entire state registry.
Mm.
If you're gonna license a cannabis shop, why not issue a independent QR code for each one so that anybody wanting to see whether it's a legitimate store or not can go in, take the QR code and see this address, this name, this location, this licensee. Cause I almost got into a fist fight with a guy who said he had a legal cannabis shop. And turns out that he didn't, he had a legal cannabis shop, but it wasn't showing up in the state registry unless you scroll down to like page 25 or whatever it was.
What I don't.
We split on good
I'm
terms.
sorry, Brendan, I'm sorry, it's on the resolution. Could you just,
Okay,
Yeah, do
Yeah.
you have access?
Yeah,
I
he just got it
gave you
fixed
access.
already.
okay, great.
Yeah,
But
so I
that,
think we got that, so I think we can,
each store
Yeah.
should have its own QR codes.
Aren't
Each
they
legal
required to
store.
have like a placard or something in the
Okay, so
window
now
that
we
says that
started again,
they're
right?
authorized by the
Alright,
state
because
to be
process is
official?
not-
Yeah, exactly.
And here-
Yeah.
Exactly, but there are a bunch of those guys, like guys that are not, that have.
sorry,
that
Brendan, go back
same
down to like, the results.
I was told to have one of the whereas clauses go down to a resolved.
Right.
Yeah, you got that, that was perfect, we're saying, line 61, just the typo on process,
Yes,
Yeah,
oh, yes.
yeah.
yes,
thank
yes.
you.
There you go.
yeah. That change didn't say for some reason.
And you can generate a QR code like that. It's not that big a
Well,
deal.
what I don't understand is if you're a landlord, in order to issue a lease
Mhm.
to a business, the business has to have certain licenses.
Mhm.
Sorry, I want to keep it focused
Yeah.
to this
Right.
Yeah,
resolution.
I know.
Well, we're just waiting for the dare.
No, we got it here.
We got it?
We have it.
Yeah, Avery.
Okay.
So you put it in there, can you read that, because of the text or the transcription, we can't read it?
I see it on
Oh, okay,
64.
let me
Yeah.
try to, there we go.
There, okay.
Got you back.
Resolve that a better than should be thought. Okay, so resolve that the straight line qualification be removed.
Which result?
So that, the one you just added, so where you are right now, yeah, that the straight line qualification be removed. And a better distance qualification. Not better, just say, and the distance qualification should be.
A minimum of 500 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be a minimum of 500 feet, yeah.
Not yet. You can remove the
Where does it say, yeah?
It says 500 feet, yeah. It's, oh, I'm sorry, you're not, I'm reading the transcript.
Oh, I was like, wow, my eyesight is really bad.
A live transcript.
Yeah. Okay,
All right, let's go back to
do
the,
people agree that that sounds fine?
Yeah,
yeah, that sounds great.
Could I amend this to suggest the individual store QR codes?
I think that's a different topic than
It's a
this, what the
different
resolution
topic.
is touching
Yeah,
on.
this is on the actual zoning for the stores.
I mean, I think it's a valid thing to discuss, but I just want to, I know we're already like an hour in here, so I think
Yeah.
to keep this targeted at the specific topic here.
Yeah, or we could, where we say on the last result there, where we're saying that we want more transparency, that OCM puts its meetings 10 days prior. Although that's a mistake, because it's not a compliance with state. I checked it and it doesn't say 10 days, so we have to take out the state open meetings law. But we could also say that there's a more visible listing of legal cannabis stores, maybe? I don't know.
I just think it needs
Yeah.
like whereas to
Yeah,
talk about the
okay,
problem and
okay.
you want to
Yeah.
like set it out
Yeah.
fully.
Okay,
I'm like open to doing something there, but I just
Yeah.
want to keep this, because I know
Okay.
everyone folks have reviewed this topic
I
already.
think one of the whereases could be that there's a proliferation of illegal cannabis shops that just appear from one day to the next, and then.
yeah. I mean, we already did a resolution.
We've done a
on that.
resolution
We did
on
a
illegal
resolution
cannabis
on that,
shops, and
okay.
like, they're starting to make progress there, like,
Yeah.
as we saw with the 44th one. So I think this is mainly just about like the fact that there are legal ones, like, we want to have a say in how, where those are placed.
Right.
And that's sort of what the focus of this resolution is.
So can you scroll down further, Brendan? Where's the next fuchsia? Okay, so we fixed that part, so that's, we move that to the resolution. But here's this, this is the one, that actually issue that Brendan had brought up.
Yeah,
That's a new addition to the, since the draft that everyone received. And also, are people okay with, because I had been using Office of Cannabis Management, there's also the Cannabis Control Board within that, right? I don't know if it makes a difference, but we can change it if people feel strongly one or the other.
Just a point of clarification on the therefore be it resolved clause.
Mhm.
Below the purple, it says that OCM get input from New York City community boards and other such entities. Is there a specific way we want them?
What other such
Like, I don't,
entities?
is there? I know, it's just a little bit, I'm just wondering, is there a
And then
specific
that-
way that we have in mind that we want them to seek our input?
Which
Or
one
is
is
it
that?
left
Is
to
that
them to
line?
Yeah,
decide?
no,
59?
I see
You
your
can
point in
check.
reading it, because we, I mean, they're kind of, because we're reviewing the licenses, we have some input, and that, what that was meant to be was that we want to input in these regulations, such as like the straight line determination and things
Oh,
like that.
in the-
Yeah, but
But-
the biggest problem in this is that when we had this discussion, and from my point of view, and others may have not known, until I spoke to Anton, I didn't realize that these regulations were based on the liquor license regulations. And at our full board meeting, I forget who it was, but somebody at that full board meeting pointed out that we're not regulating liquor stores like this. So why are we doing this with cannabis? Which again, I think is a valid point. So then I was like, well, then do we even need these additional input if that's the case? That said, I don't have children. Yesterday, I ran into some people who had come to that meeting in October where we had everybody, this room was full, of people from mostly the Tudor City area who came to against this license. And when I ran into these people who are parents of young children, their point is, no, the cannabis is different. And the smoke travels, they don't want their kids, there's all kinds of reasons why maybe the cannabis rules shouldn't be modeled after the liquor license. I don't know where I stand on
Well,
that.
there's also a difference in
Yeah.
the nature of the product, because liquor, you have to be 21 to buy it. And they don't have edible liquors. They don't have colorful products. They don't have colorful balloons outside so it's a
Creme de
different, huh?
Creme de menthe.
Yeah, well, they're from the but you know what I'm saying, it's a different product.
Yeah, and so again, that's
Yeah.
what I think other people are arguing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, most of these people who showed up at that meeting didn't even realize that cannabis had become legalized too, like that information was even missing from them, and they've just seen this proliferation. Yeah, I'm just offering that that's a public, viewpoint that I heard. And this resolution was based on that very well-attended public meeting we had. But I see the point from, the committee that deals with these licenses, that we're following what we do for the liquor licenses, and if that's the case, then there isn't much we can argue.
But are we saying, is there something specific that we want OCM to do in terms of the difference between these two?
Yeah, so to her point, that what she's saying, that perhaps we shouldn't be following the regulations
Right.
that
We
they
shouldn't,
created.
it's not the same product.
Yeah.
I think the point is like on
Yeah.
59, like
Yeah.
that be it resolved, like just making it more targeted of like, how do we want them to get input even, I think?
Yeah, so I would ask, so I would go back to originally,
Yeah,
I had said, okay, we should have 2,000 feet from a school. That was based on what community members had said in their testimonies.
right.
The response from the committee that deals with the licenses is, well, it's 500 feet for liquor stores too, so this is where this comes from. So we changed it, but we could say, no, cannabis is different.
Yeah,
And-
I think that's where we're finding the problem is
Yeah,
that
and do people want to say that in this committee is the
right,
question.
you're parting from an assumption that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's the problem. When you start with the wrong assumption, your product is going to be different.
It also goes to the issue of how many cannabis stores you have per square mile. In other words, if you have one every 2,000 feet. You'll
Or every
have maybe
500
two.
feet.
Yeah, so the
Well,
rule
yeah.
right now is 1,000, but that's the same as
Right.
liquor. And
Right.
then they make exceptions to
But the
liquor.
margin on liquor is nowhere near what the margin
Margin
on
on cannabis
cannabis
is, yeah.
is. And as a consequence, you're able to get a much higher rent
Yeah.
from the cannabis.
Yeah.
dealers
Yeah, so all of that,
than liquor stores.
Then it doesn't make sense.
this statement is vague because I myself didn't know where to fall on this after speaking with Anton.
Yeah.
And this committee can
So the
decide that we
argument-
want it to be
Yeah.
stricter than what
Yeah.
Balk wants it to be.
Yeah, so the argument would have to be, we would have to have some, backup for this, like data and stuff, I think the point is that it's not the same product, so you can't apply the same rules. So it's,
That should be a whereas.
that should
Yes,
be a whereas.
Yeah,
That should be a whereas.
Well, I think to your point, response, like what, like, I guess, like, where are folks shaking out on those rules? I guess, like, I guess on your point is like the rules should be different, but like what would the rules be?
yeah, then how much do we want to
Yeah.
say, yeah.
That's where
Put the
I would
baby
say
up.
Yeah.
get some more input from the businesses, because we don't.
Right.
like,
Well, so
we're-
Yeah,
no,
like
I
we're
got
just
to-
gonna
Nobody
make up
here is
something.
kind of involved in like
So
how
I
many
got,
feet
so the
and all
input
that.
I got from the chair of the business and license committee was that it should mirror the liquor license rules, and that's why I changed it
Right.
from 2,000 to
Right.
500.
But I'm saying, we should push back and say it should be different, it's a different product.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
we have no expertise of whether it should be 800 feet,
Yeah, we
1,000
have
feet,
no- we
2,000
have
feet.
no-
Like, I don't
There was a
know.
woman who showed up at that, so if we listen to the recording of the October ballot meeting, you'll see there's a woman who showed up who says she does this kind of research.
Mm.
Maybe we need to go back and
That's what
find
we
out who
need.
she
We
was.
need, yeah, we
'Cause you
need
remember her,
summaries.
you were at that meeting, right? So you remember her,
What kind of research?
like the impact cannabis has on young minds.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, I see you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak?
sorry.
Yes, I would like to speak. I wasn't sure about the protocol with regard to,
Sorry, I just missed your hand was raised, but go for it.
I just wanted to add a little bit of, information from the last bulk meeting that we had, with regard to, those rules. And I think there are a number of us on the committee who believe that we really should, limit the number that are in a neighborhood. And also consider the neighborhood, what's the ambiance? Is it a residential? Is it, commercial? And I think, we're basing a lot of this on that, really unacceptable ploy of the Syracuse guy to come in and want to open a multi-level cannabis lounge in that area, turning out that he was basically lying about the the story. I don't have to recreate that. But the issue that I think we should deal with, and I agree with you with regard to the distance from schools and places of worship. And additionally, in that particular neighborhood, you have Tudor City and all of the residents there. Additionally, on that same street are missions. And the Israeli mission is down the street. The Nigerian mission is across the street. You've got several schools. So I think that, there's concern that we ought to be dealing with those specific issues. I think Anton was also saying at the last meeting, it's been very difficult to get input and information from the cannabis agency, OCM. They don't have specific, really good guidelines. And so that's an issue that I think needs to be expressed somewhere. And the idea of getting the info on the cannabis, whether it's good or healthy on your for the kids and for anyone, as a matter of fact, I think that's important. And so I would say that you're on the right track to change some of the wording in that resolution, and I'm pretty sure that there would be other members that would cooperate with me that, the number in the neighborhood should, the number of those shops should be limited, and, concern for the residents and, the kids that are in the neighborhood, whether it's the parks or, going to school, is very important.
So I'm sounding like this also is something that needs to be put in the parking lot and discussed further, which we kind of knew from our email exchange already.
We
And
need more information.
yeah, more information, but we also need Val to input. Some of the things we did address, the lack of accessibility of OCM and all the emissions for this particular location is in the first resolution that was written about this.
Right. Yeah, I would entertain a motion to table this. I think it's good that we discuss it because we just want to keep moving it forward, but I don't think there's like super high time sensitivity. So definitely I would entertain a motion to table this.
Sure. Second.
Great.
Okay.
Next.
All right, next is the discussion of, it's a bill INT 1087. So this is this bridge loan program for capital funding, and basically what the bill does is it proposes doing a study on this bridge loan program. So just for context, what the bridge loan program is basically, I think, again, this is a study, so the actual contours of what this will be have yet to be worked out. But the idea is, like, a lot of nonprofits today get funding for capital expenses. So think, obviously capital projects greater than $50,000. And from when they get awarded the project to when they actually receive the funds, that can often be a long time. I don't know exactly.
No, it can take years. I'm a chair of a nonprofit board. It is painful.
Yeah. So the idea here, that this bill basically saying, do a study on, is there anything feasible, either like other, cities have done, others, what could be possible in terms of creating some bridge loan program that they received, like they awarded the funds, and then in that interim years period, they're given a loan so they can start doing the capital investments before they actually receive the funds. I am not an expert here, but broadly, I think it's interesting because it's just a study, and it's really just saying like, is this something that we should be looking into further?
Nothing wrong with a study.
Tanya,
Who would be issuing the loans?
it's just how, like, anybody who issues loans today, like that's sort of
Any
a,
bank?
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
be bank, but it could also be, there's something called the Nonprofit Finance Fund, which already
Okay.
does
Yeah.
this.
That's a
And,
good point.
yeah, and then there are people who started businesses, because this is not a city, New York City issue, this
Yeah.
is state funding, it is
Mhm.
nationally, other places as well, it's federal funding. So there are businesses that exist solely because they deal with this short-term issue of money coming from federal government or state and local governments at a later time than when you need it.
but I think the study is basically gonna say like, how should we even be doing this? Should it be banks? Should it be what, right? Like, I think that's one of the things the study plans to look into is saying, what is like a best practice or what's done across the US today? And what should be done in New York? So like that question doesn't really have an answer, but that's what the study would hope to like understand.
That's fine, but you have to depend upon the appropriation process, and then it's, you know.
I think like the
You make a
actual,
bridge loan.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's the
Oh,
risk
yeah.
these people are taking for the
Yeah.
money they're making from doing the bridge loan.
yeah. Like they're charging interest because they're taking on that.
I mean, I
risk.
have no objection to doing a study of it.
Yeah.
I just wonder the long-term outcome. I mean, the traditionally, black colleges were
Mhm.
suffering on that very
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
Mhm.
until Trump came along and guaranteed them a 10-year loan, a 10-year funding source.
Yeah.
So that was resolved for them. But I mean, unless you've got that in appropriations, I don't know if anybody would lend you money.
And I think it could
And
be
at what
like,
cost?
it could be
Yeah,
like
to have
private,
an
it could-
interest.
yeah,
Yeah, so
it
it
could
was-
be
and at what
private
cost? Yeah.
institutions as well, right? Like, I think it's just saying like, what is done today across the US and what could happen, right? It could be like it needs appropriations, then it becomes, another discussion, 6 to 12, whatever the study's done. It could be we're going to support private institutions doing this in some way, and like TBD on what that is, we don't need to get into the details
Yeah,
of
so
that,
it's-
but
I
it's
mean,
just
yeah.
saying like, yeah.
I don't
Reshma.
object.
I was gonna say, it's
Study.
different, so federal, this is the appropriation money, on the city level, a lot of the services that cities provide are outsourced to nonprofits. Right? New York City budget, but a city like Jacksonville, Florida, almost an entire budget is outsourced in their
Yeah.
social services. And so these nonprofits are doing the work with the money that's gonna come to them, but they get it after, like they're gonna submit, kind of like if you went on a trip, if you're working a corporate, you're gonna get reimbursed later. It's a lot like that, and there's people you might have a staff person who's only there because of some grant that came in. And there's a huge delay that happens in the city, the delay is happening because you have the agency that's signing off on it, you have the council sign off, you have the mayor's office sign off, you have the comptroller's office sign off. And something that should look into the study is how do you make that process more efficient?
Yeah.
Right, where they could all be looking at this at the same time. And the comptroller's office has put together this tracker of projects, and the waiting time for nonprofits has gotten less. There's also lots of small businesses that do work with the city, that contract construction, all of that kind of stuff. And those guys have the same issue about being paid. And a lot of the companies that have come about to help with this financing are more dealing with the small businesses
Right.
as opposed to the nonprofits. And the bigger issue of this funding cycle is if you're a very small business or very small nonprofit, then you don't have access to government contracts in New York because you can't deal with that delay in payment.
Yeah, and I agree with you that like in an ideal world, there is no delay, but there's
Yes,
always going to be
yeah.
some delay, and it's like, how do we minimize that?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like you can minimize the interest expense paid, it's just better, but
Yeah.
it's just a difficult reality, yeah.
So actually, I'm curious about kind of a more fundamental question about this intro, and that is, I mean, when I read it, it just seems strange to me. Why do you need a law passed by the city council for the OMB to do something internally?
That has,
Yeah.
the study has to be funded.
But OMB, I mean, city
Yeah.
budget has resources,
So
right? Like,
I-
we don't pass laws every time we need an agency to like do one little tiny
So
thing.
this
So it's
issue
like-
comes up every 4 years when there's an election, because there are candidates who run on the fact that they're gonna improve this process. And it doesn't get
Okay,
improved.
So it's That's my point then.
And
What is
because-
the reasoning behind the
Yeah,
law?
and again, to my point,
And
that
are
not
we-
enough people pay attention, not enough people vote, not enough, the people who do vote are people who work at nonprofits.
So I guess
And
like,
the other thing is
Yeah.
like, so I've done a lot of government
Yeah.
contracting, there's different types of contracts, there's a
Yeah.
term contract, cost reimbursable contract, but that kind of stuff is built into nonprofits,
Mhm.
the way they build their overhead, their financials, their
Yeah.
G&A rates, kind of that all they take that into account
Yeah.
because they know how this process works. So it's a little bit of I'm not sure what problem they're trying to solve for here. It's just the mechanism of the way city contracts work. If you do business with the city,
Yeah,
you know how it works.
Yeah.
And you build that into your cost structure.
yeah.
And
And if you're someone who doesn't have that resource, then maybe you shouldn't be doing capital projects over 50,000,
Yeah,
So I don't know, there's a lot of questions I have here. And so without having like an advocate here, like helping us understand really what this is about, I'm a little skeptical about.
yeah, and I mean, just based
Yeah.
on my comment, I'm
Yeah.
skeptical, because when I saw this, I was like, what is new here,
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and from a cost benefit analysis, I mean, a bridge loan, okay, so I'm gonna get a bridge loan, how much is that gonna cost them? Because ultimately,
Tack it onto the taxpayers.
You're gonna
so that
tack
they
it on.
contract.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like interest going to somebody else.
it's not, it's a profit. It's going to, somebody's gonna make a profit on this, and they're not gonna do it out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah.
So there's going to, I'm sorry, I'm an ex-banker, so I know that bankers are just greedy little grubby.
no, and as an ex-banker, that's when I realized it's how you make money.
If-
By doing-
And so, I just,
If we're talking capital projects
Yeah.
for a contractor with the city, a nonprofit
Mm.
contractor, why don't we treat it like capital projects for the city? I mean, they bundle out tens of millions of dollars over 10, 15 years. For example, my beloved New York City sanitation garage,
Mhm.
I think was budgeted for $250-300 million, the one that ultimately got scratched down at the old Hunter College nursing campus. Why can't they, if they're consistently using these contractors, and those contractors are reliable and proven themselves to be worthy, why not just fund it the same as you would a capital project for the city? Or better yet, fund the capital project, have the city own it, and then lease it back to the not-for-profit.
Yeah,
This is sort of in line with what both of you were saying. Why does it have to be a law? And you're saying, why can't it be a procedure in the same way that a company that's nonprofit? Is there a mechanism with a nonprofit where they would be given half upfront? And then with the completion, since the issue now is they have to do the whole thing and then wait to be reimbursed, is there a way that with the way a lot of businesses are conducted in the city, the project is proposed, half is paid, or there are increments,
Mhm.
and then in the end, you get the rest of the money? Is there a way to structure it in that way so the nonprofits don't have to wait until they've completed the project to get all of their money? So is that something that?
So,
could
I
be
mean, it goes
addressed?
back to, again, kind of what we're talking about, even with the CFP audit, right? We are very focused on there not ever being any type of fraud. So if you don't want any type of fraud, like we've seen this with homelessness, right? There's been nonprofits who run homeless shelters, and it's been a horrible situation, right? And so we don't want those kind of things to happen. This is why you do it afterwards.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you're building, if it's a capital project
Yeah.
Yes.
to fulfill some need that needs to be filled by a contractor and not, then usually in the not-for-profit space, why not have the city simply own it if it's a capital project?
Yeah, I mean, again, that I don't know. I'll give you an example because I am involved with a nonprofit that did get capital money from the city, bought a building, right?
Bought a building.
Yeah, bought a building, right? But to get the city money, so we have a bridge loan right now from somebody,
A bank?
a nonprofit finance fund. I mean, I don't,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, I guess I can be, I don't think it's not public information. But the issues that come up is, okay, the building is ADA accessible because you can't get city money unless it's ADA accessible, right? Then there are already some tenants in the building. You cannot, if you've gotten city funds. And in this situation, it was city and state and federal, like a lot of different, because buildings in New York cost a lot of money. And it's, okay, so are you displacing a tenant, a business? And if you are, you gotta find that business a place to go, right? And all of that, we're 2 years into this process now. Yeah, everything should be simpler, and then every time I dig into stuff, again, with everything that we've discussed today, it just becomes very, very complicated.
Yes.
I have a question on that though, because with many businesses, you have to present an RFP. And it shows in increments what you're going to do if it's over a 6-month period. This is how much, this is a third, this is what we're going to do. You have to then present documentation that you completed what you did on that third. So there isn't any fraud. To me, it should be conducted in the same way that any other business is, only you're getting the grant from the city. But there's a way to do this without it having to be a law and without nonprofits having to wait until they finish the whole thing and sit around and wait to get the money. To me, it's not done from a business standpoint when it's a capital project, which is business. So to me, it shouldn't be that difficult to be able to present it the same way that many other businesses have to do in the private sector. And in the private sector, they definitely don't want fraud. They don't want to give you the second part of the money that's in that RFP if you haven't fulfilled the first part that's in that RFP.
I guess so taking terms of committee, folks seem like at least somewhat interested in this, but we just don't have enough info. So what I can do is we can reach out, Brendan, we can reach out to the sponsors of this and just ask them to come in and talk to it if they're interested.
Who are the sponsors? Do you know?
But someone not
sure.
from public relations, because this wasn't a numbers man, and he was talking about funding, he was talking about staffing and an audit. And to start out saying, we don't have a resource problem, and then the whole presentation was, he does have a resource problem.
Well, I think that's,
I agree with
let's
you.
not read into that too much, but I agree.
No, But it's not more of a business person to come in.
I think they just have a party line of how they're approaching it.
Yeah,
CFP, we don't need to over-index to it, but I think what we can do is we can figure out, we know the sponsor, we can figure it out online very quickly.
Yeah,
We'll
the
reach out.
sponsors are gonna be city council members.
Yeah, the sponsors will be the council members, and we'll tell them to send somebody who's obviously familiar with this bill to come talk to it and just sort of give us like the pitch of it, and we can ask them questions.
I think that's the way to
folks
go.
are broadly brought into like the fact that there's an issue here. It's just that we don't know enough. So I think that's enough for us to say, let's put it on the agenda next meeting if we can bring somebody in.
Just curious, the city's gonna fund your purchase of a building.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens if your nonprofit goes away? Who owns the building?
Whoever financed it.
No, because it's city. I mean,
You're
it's not
gonna own
all, some of the money is, you can't, it's not all totally city funded. Some of it is
From your donor?
donors, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
who's gonna own
but
it
yeah,
when
but the
it's-
building, if it's nonprofit, I have to ask that question. I don't know, but I think perhaps the city would take it back because the purchase wouldn't be possible without city money,
Right.
but there's also state money and federal money
And your
coming.
donors.
Yeah. I will have to ask that. I've
that's why I
never
think
thought
the
that
city
it could
ought
go
to-
anywhere, yeah.
Yeah,
the city's
okay, we can
doing
start.
it.
I just want to keep this moving because I know we've been here for an hour and a
Yeah,
half
yeah,
already
yeah.
and don't want to keep folks too
But
late.
that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the last one is just on that LICH Act. So this is something that Sandy and Health passed over to us, just given where timing is. I think the main thing I just wanted to do here is just don't have a resolution to pass, but just wanted to bring it to folks' attention. Not too much sort of to actually pass here. But basically this act, we distributed some materials, but what's happened is it's passed the Assembly and the Senate and it's on the governor's desk today. And this really is giving the local communities more of a say when a hospital's closing, forcing hospitals to put together a closure plan to basically help those who are impacted. And it's right now sitting on the governor's desk. I think it was delivered to the governor, Brendan, very recently.
Yes, so.
Will they sign it?
Okay, so, yes, it was delivered to the governor's desk last Monday, December 2nd. When a bill is delivered to the governor's desk, the governor has 14 days to either sign the legislation or veto it. I asked a staff writer, someone member of Epstein's office as to what it means when a bill reaches the governor's desk. Usually it means that Well, what it does mean is that the governor has already made her mind as to whether she'll sign or veto the legislation, so I guess that means that any day now, well, you should expect to hear whether she has decided to sign this or veto this.
So not too much to do there, but just wanted to bring, because like, we didn't know that, I mean, when we put together this agenda,
Contact your local
but yeah.
officials.
Yeah,
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 so I think we'll monitor it and like, we can sort of see what happens. If it does, go either way, I'll give an update and like chair's report next meeting, and we can sort of decide what we want to do, but not much to do on that now. Just wanted to give folks a heads up that that bill is happening. Or
Yeah.
something.
and, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, obviously, the hope might be for the governor to sign this, but if she vetoes it, then there might be a conversation of, okay, like, should one of the committees, whether it be budget, whether it be health, like, urge the legislature to like reconsider it, pass it again, and urge the governor to sign rather than veto, but hopefully, we'll see what the governor does.
so that was that, for the chair's report, given the time, I'm just gonna waive the chair's report. And then if any member of the committee has any old or new business,
I have
please.
old business.
Yeah,
And we discussed it, you were absent last meeting.
oh yeah, what's your
Yeah.
reporting, yeah.
I started drafting, I haven't finished it yet, a resolution to address the issue that we spoke about with respect to the compounded annual growth rate assumed in New York City pension plans. And number of pension advisory units suggest that it be no more than 6%. The state of New York, for example, uses 5.9%. The city of New York goes 110 basis points higher than that, 7%, which tends to increase the level of risk. And for example, in the New York City pension report that was just issued at the end of October, the city showed that it had $19 billion in a quote high yield bond fund. Well, a high yield means
High risk.
high risk.
high risk,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely. So, and to my mind, that's, you're messing with people's retirement. And the city has an obligation to live up to its promises to its employees who have served in public service for 30 odd years. So I sent you what I had started,
Yeah,
but I hadn't finished it. I tried to pick it up this morning and got a phone call and, we need you to do this, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to finish it today. I should be able to finish it sometime this week. I will send it to, this building, the committee staff,
Yeah.
and they can distribute it to you, and perhaps we can take a vote on it next week. It's very disconcerting to me that we are at 7% compounded annual growth rate for our pensions, and it has been for quite some time. We were at 7%, if I can remind you, when the Federal Reserve was basically at a zero interest rate policy. So our risk was up here.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous.
yeah,
And we all, those of us of a certain age certainly can remember 1975
Oh, yeah.
and the New Daily News famous headline, Ford's a city dropped dead, when we were almost bankrupt or we're on the verge of bankruptcy. Well, that can happen via pension plans too. States can't go bankrupt, cities can. And to my mind, we're playing a very, very dangerous game with the city's pension funds. There are other pension funds in other municipalities, other states that are overfunded. They have 110, 120% funding. We are at 85% funding,
With a 7%.
right?
so
And we
yeah,
are,
sorry, we can take that in the
and
next
they-
meeting with the reso.
right, and
Yeah,
a higher, New York State has a higher funded ratio, like 95%, and a lower compounded.
so yeah, when you have that reso together, you can send it over to Brendan and then
Yeah.
me and Steve as
Yeah.
well, we can look at it, we can go from there.
Yeah, I sent you the. first
Yeah, I know,
part.
it's just, I
I just
we're
need
still a
to
work in
figure out
progress.
what our
Yeah.
next step would be. Would we Would we suggest that they go to a 6% rate?
Yeah.
Would we suggest an evaluation by financiers as to the New York City rate? Because this is all, it's all run singly by the controller and his
So the
actuary.
Manhattan Institute has written a lot about this and they probably have a recommendation on there, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I can Google it and
What do they say,
yeah, but they basically have been saying the same thing you've been saying for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that in 75, the way the city avoided bankruptcy was because the unions negotiated
The
their
unions
pensions. Yeah.
negotiated and Jerry Ford put in a loan guarantee
Yeah.
finally.
All right, cool. So
I
we'll
didn't know
continue
about
to
Jerry
work-
Ford
yeah.
loan guarantee because all you ever hear is someone who wasn't around then
Well, but
go to hell,
The headline,
New York
yeah.
City. Yeah.
no, but he ultimately
Yeah.
came through for it.
So yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll work on that offline with
Yeah,
you. We can figure
thank
out the
you.
next steps. Yeah.
I know it's been a long meeting, so I'm just gonna throw it out there. We'll bring it for the next meeting. But when we voted on the budget and we want more affordable housing, right? When we said that that should be one of the priorities. I asked someone a question once, like, how much land does the city own? And what are the priorities in the use of those lands? And no one has been able to answer me. And, there's a report that is put together by the Municipal Art Society that shows the public assets, how many are leased, how many are not being used, and 22% of our land that the city owns is underused. It's not being used at all. So my question is, like, for example, when Spark was decided and this is what we're gonna do, how is it prioritized? How does the city prioritize the use of this land?
It's an EDC question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's probably a good question for the land use committee.
Yeah.
yeah, well, I'm on land use.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think it's a good question for that committee, but I think if you could send us that report, like send it to Brendan. he
I'm
can
gonna send it to
the
Brendan.
Full committee, I think could be cool
Yeah,
just for us to
we'll send it
look
to
at and think
Brendan.
about what we want to do with that. But I think it's like, it does fall within EDC and land use for sure. So I think if you bring it up there too,
Yeah.
they'll have more expertise on that. than-
Yeah, no, but
Yeah, I
land
think
use
it's a very
doesn't,
good
we
point.
don't meet until, I think, January or something.
Right.
Yeah.
EDC leases and develops all city owned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the borough president last year maybe it was 2 years ago, had done this whole report too about him identifying places we could build affordable housing in Manhattan.
Yeah.
I'll try to find that. I mean, it's all has to be on his website, so, yeah.
All right,
I'd just be curious, how they
Yeah.
prioritize it.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion-
Awesome, thank you. With that, we're adjourned at 8:14 PM.
And thank you for making